Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the New Yankee Workshop. Recently, while we were doing a This Old House project in Florida, we had a special tour of the Flagler Museum in Palm Beach, where we found a wonderful piece of furniture. We'll build it today, right here in the New Yankee Workshop.
The New Yankee Workshop features the craftsmanship of Norm Abram.
This is the Flagler Museum, built as a residence for Henry M. Flagler and his third wife. It was completed in 1902 on the shores of Lake Worth, which is part of the Intercoastal Waterway. It must have been a wonderful winter playground for Flagler and his wealthy friends. Earlier today, I got a tour with the director, John Blades. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Norm.
Thanks for letting us in for a tour before the crowds arrive.
It's our pleasure. Welcome to Whitehall.
This is quite an entranceway. Not only is this room huge, but the ornamentation is unbelievable, including this painting in the middle of the ceiling.
Well, this room is the first room Flagler's guests would see, and it's definitely large. It's 4,400 square feet of floor space, and it's full of symbolism, as many homes were at the time. This center painting you notice is called the Crowning of Knowledge, and it's flanked by lunettes on either side called Happiness and Prosperity. So the not-so-subtle message was that through knowledge comes happiness and prosperity.
Now, I noticed that there's some restoration going on.
There's always restoration going on here, but it's even accelerated now. We're preparing for our centennial next year, so we're in the middle of a 2-year, $5 million restoration program, and you'll see restoration everywhere you go here.
Well, it comes along with all old houses, right?
Absolutely, sure does.
Would this be Mr. Flagler here?
This is a portrait of Flagler done by a society painter, Madrazo, and it's a good time for me to mention that Flagler is known for developing Florida, but before that he was a founding partner at Standard Oil with John D. Rockefeller.
Mm-hmm. Now, he built this house for his third wife, is that correct?
He built this house as a wedding gift and also as part of a social obligation. It was incumbent on people of his stature in American society to build homes like this as symbols for all of us, really.
So as an example, he was setting an example.
Exactly.
What's this room here?
Well, the first floor is arranged around a central courtyard, and this first room that we're entering is the library.
Wow, what a room.
Not as extensive as some libraries you might see in homes of this period, because Flagler was only really here for 6 to 8 weeks out of the year.
The workmanship is incredible.
Well, you got to remember, 19th century Americans were big believers in technology. I mean, here's a good example. They put this entire house up in 18 months at what was then the edge of the Everglades,
Mm-hmm.
and they did it through modern technology. It might look like an old building, but it's definitely a very modern building. That's a cast plaster ceiling. That's canvas, not leather. The idea was to make it look like wood and leather, though.
Wow, it sure does look like the real thing, I'll tell you. Nice wooden bookcases filled with the leather volumes.
Absolutely. A lot of beautiful woodwork in the floors and cabinetry.
A lot of interesting, very heavy, ornate pieces of furniture.
Exactly. Not so heavy and ornate here, though. This is the music room. Much more of a feminine quality to this. And it also served as the art gallery.
Wow, I mean, it is just filled with art. This art must come from all over the world.
Exactly.
So he was quite a collector.
He was, it turns out, to be a fairly good collector of paintings and sculpture.
Tell me about these light fixtures.
They're incredible, aren't they?
Amazing.
Yeah, these are Caldwell and Company fixtures. In fact, the fixtures throughout the house came from Caldwell and Company, the best-known lighting manufacturer of the time, and they're hung with Baccarat crystal.
Wow. And an organ.
And an organ. Again, very much believers in technology, so having the most technologically advanced instrument built right into your home is a pretty big deal. This is a 1249 pipe Odell organ, and of course they didn't have TV back then or radio, so a lot of the entertaining was done here in the music room.
Does it still work?
It does.
Wow, that's great. Well, I'm seeing a lot of furniture around, but boy, some of it looks a little intimidating for a project at the New Yankee Workshop. You have any other pieces that I could look at?
I've got a feeling on the second floor we'll find something.
Okay. Wow. This is what I call a bathroom.
It sure is. It's one place in the house where all the technology comes together in one space. Phone over here on the wall. Imagine a phone in the bathroom in 1902. Electric lighting throughout. Very elaborate plumbing. A shower, a bath, a toilet. In fact, the most elaborate plumbing fixture of all is this double sink with onyx and nickel-plated plumbing.
Wow, wouldn't my plumbing friend Richard Chathui love to see this? Look at all that beautiful piping. And this spout, it's built right into the onyx top. What a piece. Beautiful.
Right. Well, this is the thing I wanted to show you, Norm. I think this might work for your project.
Wow, what would you call this?
It's a shaving stand.
I see. So you have your mug and your shaving brush, and I suppose it's mirror tips so you can see yourself when you're shaving. Straight edge razor. and maybe some room for some storage. Looks like it's made out of bird's eye maple.
Yes, I think so.
I think you found us just the right piece for the workshop.
Great.
Well, maybe before the crowds arrive, I'll take a couple pictures and make some sketches if you don't mind.
That'd be terrific.
All right, thanks, John. Well, here it is, our version of the shaving stand. It's a pretty faithful reproduction of the one that we saw at the Flagler Museum, except that I decided to build ours out of cherry rather than maple. It has the pivoting round mirror. The beveled mirror has been ordered and it should be here later today. Now, once you take the plan and develop patterns like this one for the support of the mirror, and make a jig out of plywood to speed up the production of the legs, as well as making a fixture out of plywood where I can mount the glued up blank for the mirror and then take my circle cutting jig on my router and cut it out, this project moves along pretty quickly. Now, if you'd like to build your own version of the shaving stand, a measure drawing is available with the materials list and all the pattern drawings, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. There are only a couple glue-ups on this piece, one of them being the top. And that's what I started on this morning. These two boards are just about right, but not quite wide enough. So I'm going to add one more piece to the middle. That'll also allow me to get rid of some of this dark material right along the front edge. Check this out. When I was running the stock through my planer, I saw this shiny speck, and I thought, oh no, I've hit a nail. But at closer inspection, it's very soft. It's an old lead bullet. Missed the deer, hit the tree. Now, before I can glue this up, I have to clean up the edges so that they're tighter and nice and straight. So I'll turn to the joiner. Before we use any power tools, however, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. A couple passes through the joiner should clean up that edge. All right. Now that fits pretty well. The centerpiece is a little thinner. If I bring it up to the top, you can see that that joint is nice and tight. Now I can glue it up. No biscuits. I think the glue will be enough. The glues are so good these days that for a small top like this that's not going to be under too much strain, I think it's plenty. Okay, now let's make a blank for the mirror. The frame for the mirror is made up of segments. Here's one, you can see the joint. Here's another one, a third one, and a fourth one. To make up those segments, I start out with pieces of stock that are 7/8 of an inch thick, 12 inches long, about 3.5 inches wide. When you make a circle out of 4 blanks, the cut of the angle is 45 degrees. After these are clipped where they join together, I'll end up with about 2 inches of joint length. I only need 1.25 inches for the mirror. I'll clip these corners at the table saw. Okay, all the joints fit nicely. Glue alone is not going to be enough to hold them together. Let me show you what I did on the prototype. I made a groove and inserted a spline. This is a very traditional way of joining segments together. To make the groove, I've set up the dado for a 1/4 inch width. I'm using my tenon jig to guide the piece through. I'll push it through in this direction, turn it around, push it through in the other direction, centering the groove. Here's a piece of stock to make the spline. I don't want to rip across the grain for the thickness. I want to rip with the grain. That'll give me maximum strength. I've set the fence to give me a spline a little bit thicker than I need. I can always remove more later. That'll do it. Now it's glue on all 4 sides of this spline and in the groove that makes it a strong joint. right, we'll let that cook for a while. Let's make some legs. Here are the 4 blanks for my legs. They're 1 1/8 thick, and I'm laying them out using this plywood template that I made. I'm going to cut it out on the bandsaw, staying about 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch away from the line. With the legs roughed out, I am now going to attach the jig that I used for the layout. Screw holes won't show because it's where the shelf is going to be located. Once the jig is attached, I can bring it to my router table where I removed the fence and installed this flush trimming bit. It has a ball bearing at the top, which is going to ride on the template, and the cutter will trim it flush. Let's take another look at the prototype. With the sanding complete on the legs, the next detail is right on the outer face. There's a little groove on each side of the leg. The antique original had that. The bit that I'm going to use is called a flush trimming V-groove bit. The ball bearing will guide the bit along the edge of the leg. I put a mark where I want to start, and I go all the way to the bottom. There are 2 shelves. On the antique original, they just butted into the back of the leg. I've decided to make a shallow dado for the shelf. That'll make it easier to assemble, and it'll make it stronger. Now let me show you the setup. Once again, the stacked dado set for 9/16 of an inch in width, 1/16 in height. I've ganged the 4 legs together. I'll make a pass for each set of slots. In the antique original, the shelf was held with screws where they left the head show. I'm going to drill a through hole and a counterbore because I want to cover the head of the screw. Alright, now this is the blank we glued up earlier for the top. I've just run it through my wide belt sander to make it all smooth and even. Now I'll size it. Let's take another look at the prototype, and I'll show you how the side is connected to the top. I have a classic cross grain situation. The grain at the top runs this way, the grain of the side runs this way. If I were to glue this joint as the top comes and goes, it could split. So what I've done is created a dovetail joint. It runs all the way from the back to just shy of the front. I've glued it at the front, but I've left the rest of it free so the top can come and go along the side piece. The first thing I want to do is make the dovetail socket in the top. Okay, now I want to make a dovetail in the side piece that'll slide into that slot. The first thing I want to do is make the shoulder cut. So I've set up the saw blade for a very shallow cut. Now the bevel on that dovetail bit that I used is 8 degrees, so I'm tipping the saw blade to 8 degrees. I'm going to set my fence so that I just clip the corner. I don't want to make this joint too loose. If it's too tight, I can always take off some more. Alright, now we'll slide it in, and you can see that I can't get it to go all the way. So I need to notch the front edge the amount that it's sticking by the back. Now if we look underneath the case, I want to show you the connection between the back and the side. It's a little tongue and groove joint. I need to make a groove along the side piece. There's also a groove on the inside of this back piece which receives the bottom, and you can see a gap here which I've allowed for expansion. There's also a groove on the inside of each side piece which receives a tongue from the end of the bottom panel. I'll make all those at the router table. All the tongues that fit in those grooves are made the same way. Here's the bottom panel. I need a tongue on each edge and along the back. Here's how the bottom panel fits into the side. Because this is a stop dado, I have to notch out a bit of the tongue so that it'll fit. Using the same setup, except now with the panel vertical, and using my miter gauge, I'll nick it off. Okay. That's perfect. Now it's time to treat the edges of the top. It has a half round inset and the corners are just eased. I've set up a 1/2 inch round nose bit and a featherboard to keep the top tight against the fence as I run it through. Now I'll just knock off the sharp corners, sand everything, and we'll be ready to assemble the case. I have one of the side pieces here, and I've slipped the back in on one end. I'm only putting glue on the first 3 or 4 inches towards the front of the case. Just want to freeze that part of it. The rest of it should move freely. All right, now some glue at the front end of the dovetail joint. I don't want to put the glue on the dovetail itself, otherwise it'll drag it back along the edge and then it'll freeze the whole piece. I want it to freeze at the front, but move every place else. Now I really don't need them, but I'll put a couple small clamps along the front here to hold it in place while the glue cures. Set this aside and tomorrow we'll easily finish this project. Good morning. I'm getting started today working on the shelves for our shaving stand. For some reason the antique original had a different shape for each shelf, so I've made patterns. The corners have to be clipped off where they fit into the legs. To clip the corners, I'm going to use the table saw with the miter gauge set at 45 degrees. Now I just trace the shape from my pattern. Now I'm just easing the edges of the curved areas with a 1/4 inch radius bit. Once that's done, we're ready for some assembly. To attach the legs, a little dab of glue, and I take that dado that I milled in the leg, slip it over the shelf, pre-drill a hole for a screw, and attach it. To attach the leg assembly to the case, I'm going to use number 0 biscuits, which I'll modify slightly. With some glue in the slot and the biscuit installed, I can trim off the excess. All right, now we slip everything together and clamp it. Now when I lay out for the brackets that support the mirror, I try to get as much of it running along the grain of the wood. That means I'll have to cut the bottom at a slight angle. Now here's that blank that we glued up yesterday for the mirror frame. I'm making a rough cut of the outside diameter. Now I've mounted the blank to a piece of plywood with some screws from the back side roughly centered over this pivot hole. The pivot hole is for the pin in my circle cutter for the router. It'll allow me to cut a perfect circle. I'll trim a little bit with each pass. I shorten the radius, and then I can cut the inside of the frame. While it's still secure in the frame, I've switched routers and router bits, and I'm rounding over the edges. Well, once again, I've switched router bits, this time to a rabbiting bit. I flip the mirror over and I'm making a recess for the mirror. Now we're ready to install these mirror swivel hinges, which I picked up at a woodworker's store. Well, now I can take the whole assembly and attach it to the base with a couple biscuits. And I'm only using glue at the center of these brackets because I have a cross-grain situation. We'll just clamp this in place. Now we're ready to make the drawer. The sides are connected to the front with dovetail joints, and that's what I've set up to do here. I'm going to use a router with a dovetailing bit, and by following this template, I can cut the pins in the front and the tails in the side all in one operation. Perfect every time, and they look great. With my 1/4-inch dado in the table saw, I'm able to make a groove in all the drawer parts for the bottom. With the dado set to 1/2 inch width, that groove will receive the back of the drawer. With the dovetails glued, I slide the bottom in dry, install the back, and nail it up. Okay, that takes care of the drawer. Now there's one more thing I want to do, is take these 3/8 inch plugs, fill these holes to cover the screws, cut them off and sand them flush, and this piece will be ready for the finishing room. For the finish on our shaving stand, I'm starting with an oil stain. The color is red mahogany. I apply a liberal coat on all the parts, let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes, and then take a rag and wipe off the excess. After the stain dried, I did a very light sanding, applied 1 coat of satin polyurethane, then I gave it another light sanding, and we're on the 2nd coat now. With 2 coats of poly on the shaving stand and all nice and dry, we're ready to install the mirror. Nice round beveled mirror that I got from my local supplier. Drop that into the frame. And then I rolled up some small pieces of duct tape to just slip in as a pad and keep it centered before those. And then a piece of 1/4 inch plywood goes over the whole thing like that. And then some small brass nails that go in some pre-drilled holes will hold everything in place. A little pull. Works great. I hope Mr. Flagler would approve.